Kill Team 24 is here. If you want to save some time and not read through that entire core rulebook, we're going to give you the quick rundown of all the rules that you need to know to start getting your games in. So the first step is going to be setting up your kill zone. You're going to need the kill zone board and then whatever set of terrain you choose to use. Hivestorm came with Volcus, and it came with these fancy cards that actually have preset layouts for you. You can pick one of these options or roll a die to randomly select one if you want. Keep in mind you can set up the terrain however you want as well, and there are some guides online and in the core rulebook that give you some tips on how to set up a good balanced board. Next, set the objective markers up in the specified locations or find good centralized positions that are fairly balanced for your board. Now both players will roll off for the pre-game initiative. The winner is going to decide who will take the initiative, and whoever has the initiative will select which drop zone they want. Now each player can secretly select the operatives they want to take for the game, and then they can reveal them to one another at the same time. And in the same manner as the operatives were selected, each player can now select 4 pieces of equipment and reveal them to one another simultaneously. Note that some equipment options come with more than one piece, such as ladders, which you get 2 for one selection. And then this is the point in the game where both players are going to gain their first 2 command points. And again, in secret, each player can now choose one tac op that they would like to try to score points on throughout the game. There are 4 different archetypes for the tac ops: Seek and Destroy, Security, Recon, and Infiltration. Every kill team is restricted to taking tac ops from its respective archetypes. Now back over to the board, each player, starting with the player who has the initiative, can begin by placing 1 item of equipment. This will alternate until there's no longer any equipment items to be placed on the board. Starting with the player who has the initiative, players alternate deploying a third of their kill team wholly within their drop zone. Note that if the thirds of the kill team are not equal, the largest one must be placed first. All operatives must be deployed with the conceal order. Once all operatives have been deployed onto the board, we can go into the scouting step. There are 3 options for scouting. One is Equip, which allows the player to select an additional equipment option for the game. Ploy, which allows the player to select a strategic gambit to use in the first turning point for free, and Reposition, which allows them to select one of their operatives to perform a reposition act with, as long as they end wholly within 3 inches of their drop zone. Each player selects their option secretly, and they reveal it to one another at the same time. Based on a rock, paper, scissors-like system, each player's choice will decide who gets to determine who will take the initiative in the first turning point. In this system, Equip beats Ploy, Ploy beats Reposition, and Reposition beats Equip. Whoever wins in the scouting step can determine who will take the initiative in the first turning point. Note that the player with the pre-game initiative will resolve their scouting selection first. Now at this point, we're finally ready to move into the beginning of the first turning point. In the strategy phase of the first turning point, each player can secretly select their primary op. The primary op can either be the crit op, the kill op, or your secretly selected tac op. Based on the player's selection, the primary op is there to help you score additional points at the end of the game. I'll talk more about the primary and the kill op later on in the video. Now that we're into the first turning point, it's time to talk about all the different actions that your operatives can perform. First, we'll start with movement. Each operative has its own move characteristic found on its data card. That distance is how far an operative can move with a reposition action. However, if an operative is below half of its wound count, then it's going to be injured and can move its move characteristic minus 2 inches. Now the dash action is similar to reposition, however, the distance will be the same for all operatives, and it'll be 3 inches. Along with performing these movement actions, operatives can climb over terrain on the kill zone. To do this, measure the vertical distance of the object that wants to be climbed over and subtract it from the operative's move characteristic. As you can see in this example, the barricade would be rounded to a 2-inch climb, and then the operative can move 4 inches after that. As you see in this example, the operative starts within 1 inch of the terrain feature it wishes to climb. Looking at the vertical distance, this terrain feature is 4 inches high, so the operative will need to spend 4 of its inches in order to move up, and 2 inches will be remaining for it to move horizontally. Now let's say an operative wants to drop off of this vantage point. In some instances, the operative will have to spend some of its movement in order to drop. In distances of 2 inches or less, ignore that distance, as we did in the barricade example. However, in this example, the distance is 4 inches. We're going to ignore the first 2 inches, only spending 2 of them to drop. Therefore, we still have 4 inches of horizontal movement. In an instance where other operatives' bases may be preventing you from placing your operative on the ground, you can actually jump outwards, assuming you still subtract the 2 inches for dropping. In this example, you can see the operative jumping outwards past the other operatives to a place it can be placed. Operatives can also jump over a gap between terrain features as long as it's no more than 4 inches horizontally. Next, the charge action is simply how operatives will get within an inch of enemy operatives. The charge distance is going to be the operative's move characteristic plus 2 inches, and they must end that charge within 1 inch of the enemy. On a similar note, if an operative no longer wants to be within an inch of an enemy, it can perform the fallback action for 2 AP. The fallback action allows that operative to move outside of the enemy operative's control range up to its movement characteristic. Now in Kill Team, there's going to be many instances where you're going to be asked to control points. In order to get control of a point, you need to have more APL within an inch of the edge of those points. In this example, you see the Space Marine with 3 APL within an inch of the point, and the Skitarii within an inch of the point with 2 APL. In this situation, the Kill Team with the Space Marine on it has control of the point as it has more APL on it. This same concept applies to markers that can be picked up, such as the one you see in this example. Since the Space Marine controls this point, he can perform the pickup marker action to carry the marker. An operative carrying a marker can spend 1 AP to drop the marker anywhere in its control range. Now we'll move into something a little bit more exciting. The fight action can be performed on an enemy operative within 1 inch and visible to an operative. At the beginning of the fight action, each player is going to select one profile on each operative's data card to fight with. Now simultaneously, or at least as close as possible, each operative will roll their attack dice for the fight action, looking to get dice that are equal to or above that weapon's weapon skill, also found on their data card. In this example, the Skitarii is fighting, and he rolls 3 dice looking for 4 ups. With these results, he has 1 miss, 1 normal hit, and 1 critical hit. And in response, the Space Marine rolls looking for 3s, and he gets 3 regular hits and 2 critical hits. Now the first thing the players are going to do before striking or parrying is to retain their dice. This means that anything below their weapon skill will be discarded unless they want to re-roll it with CP or any other means. In this example, we see the Skitarii's 1 die result of 1 gets discarded. Starting with the attacking operative, dice can be resolved with either striking the opponent or parrying out one of their hits. In this example, the Space Marine is going to use one of his critical hits to parry out the Skitarii's critical hit. Note that a normal cannot be used to parry a crit, but a crit can be used to parry a normal. Now our Skitarii friend is just going to strike with his normal hits, and then the Space Marine is going to take the rest of his dice that are remaining and send them straight through. Now in this example, we see this Ruststalker providing combat support to the Skitarii who's fighting the Space Marine. In a situation like this, the Skitarii can add 1 to its weapon skill, meaning it'll now be hitting on 3s instead of 4s. This does stack up to a maximum of a weapon skill of 2. And now in this example, we see another Space Marine in the control range of that Ruststalker. In this scenario, if there's more than 1 operative in that operative's control range, it cancels out the combat support. So the Skitarii is back to hitting on 4s in this scenario. Now we can talk about shooting attacks. The first step to every shooting attack is to ensure your model has visibility on the model you want to shoot. To do this, draw an imaginary line from the head of your model to the target you want to shoot. As long as you can see any part of that model, from the handle of an axe to the tip of a bolt pistol, you can see that target. It is visible. The only thing that doesn't count for visibility would be the model's base. Now there's many different scenarios for shooting attacks, so we're going to try to cover at least one example of each here. First, we'll start with the simplest, shooting a target out in the open with no cover. In this example, the Skitarii wants to shoot the Space Marine out in the open. He's going to roll 4 dice, and he's looking for 3 ups, which matches his ballistic skill on his data card. He gets 1 crit, 1 hit, and then 2 dice that are below his ballistic skill. At this point, the shooting operative can retain their dice. If they want to reroll anything, now is the time to do it. Now the operative being shot gathers their defense dice and then rolls, looking to match the save characteristic on their data card. In this example, the Space Marine's rolling 3 dice, looking for 3 ups. He gets 2 5s and a 1. So with all the retained dice, the Skitarii is going to discard his 2 fails. The Space Marine will discard his failed save. And then in this scenario, the Space Marine can use his 2 normal saves to cancel out the crit, meaning only the 1 normal hit would go through and deal damage on the Space Marine. Next, we'll introduce cover into the equation. If the cover lines being drawn from the shooting operative intersect terrain that's within an inch of the target, that model has cover. A good way to determine the cover lines is to use a line laser and draw from anywhere on the shooting operative's base to both edges of the target. An operative that is in cover can retain 1 die as a normal save before rolling any of its defense dice. In this example, the Space Marine is keeping 1 normal success before rolling his 2 other saves. Here we see the retained dice for the same shooting attack. The Skitarii will discard his 2 fails, and then the Space Marine can use his 1 cover save to save the normal, and then use the 2 other saves that he rolled to cancel out the crit, meaning no damage goes through. Now let's consider the same situation, except the operative that's trying to be shot has a conceal order and is still within an inch of the cover. In this instance, the target actually cannot be selected as a valid target. Think about it like the concealed operative is hiding behind that barricade. Now in the same sense, if the operative doing the shooting is within 2 inches of that hiding operative, that target is no longer in cover and can be shot. Keep in mind the shooting operative must still be outside of the target's control range, otherwise it can't perform the shoot action. Now let's explore an example where the operative doing the shooting is on a vantage point, shooting at a target that's behind light cover that is at least 2 inches below it. In this case, the Space Marine cannot use the light cover to hide behind, but can use it to retain a cover save. In other words, the Skitarii can shoot the Space Marine, however he is going to get the benefits of the cover. And in this case, since the Space Marine has a conceal order, he actually gets additional benefits for being in cover. This being, he can either retain 2 normal successes for cover, or 1 critical success. And thus, as you see in this example, only 1 die needs to be rolled after 2 regulars are saved for the cover, and then once again, all the dice get saved and no damage will go through in this example. Now it's also very important to note that if the Space Marine had an engaged order, the shooting operative actually receives the benefits. In this specific example, since the terrain is 2 inches higher than the target operative, the shooting model would get accurate 1, meaning it can automatically retain 1 normal die without needing to roll it. If the vantage point is at least 4 inches higher than the operative with an engaged order, it gets accurate 2, meaning it can retain 2 before rolling. As you see in this example, the Space Marine's hiding behind the heavy barricade, and since it is heavy terrain, even though the shooting operative is on the vantage point, it still cannot select the Space Marine as a valid target. Now let's talk about obscurement. Obscuring is what happens when an operative is outside of an inch of heavy terrain, and the model that wants to shoot that operative has to draw a cover line through that heavy terrain, as you see in this example. In this edition, an obscured target can still be shot, however there will be downsides for the operative performing the shoot. In this example, we have the Space Marine rolling his 3 defense dice because he is not within an inch to receive the benefits of cover. And now when we go to the retaining step of the shooting attack, the operative performing the shoot action is not able to retain any of its dice as crits, and then also 1 normal success has to be discarded. So in this case, instead of a crit and a hit, we're left with just 1 regular hit, which the Space Marine can easily save with its roll. Now if we look at the same shooting attack, except the Skitarii is now within an inch of that heavy barricade, the shooting attack is no longer obscuring, as the Skitarii is close enough to ignore that terrain piece. The last common action is known as a Counteract. A Counteract is performed after you've activated all of your models, but your opponent still has more models to activate. Most operatives need to be on an engaged order in order to perform this, however Astartes operatives are able to perform this on any order. With a Counteract, an operative can perform a 1 AP action, and if that action is a move, it can move no more than 2 inches. Now that we've set the whole game up and we know all the common actions, let's talk about the game sequence. First up, we enter the strategy phase. At the beginning of the strategy phase, first initiative for the turning point is determined. In the first turning point, this is decided by whoever won the scouting step. In subsequent turning points, it's decided by a roll-off, and the winner of the roll-off decides who goes first. In the first turning point, each player will gain 1 CP. In subsequent turning points, the player who does not get the initiative will gain 2 CP. And they ready all of their operatives. Now players, starting with the player with initiative, can alternate using strategic gambit abilities or ploys. Each kill team has its own custom strategic gambits that it can use for its command points. Once each player has passed on using a new strategic gambit, the firefight phase can begin. In this phase, all operatives are activated until every single one of them has been expended. Then we reach the end of the turning point, and we cycle back to the start of the next turning point. There are 4 turning points in a standard kill team game. Now let's talk about how you can score points in the game with all of the ops that you picked earlier in the video. The kill op tracks how many enemy operatives you've taken out, And based on how many total operatives were on your opponent's team, you score that many victory points at the end of the game. For example, if the enemy player has 6 models on their team, and by the end of the game you've eliminated 4 of them, your kill grade is at a 3, and each time you go up a kill grade, you gain 1 VP. At the end of the game, the player with the higher kill grade scores an additional VP. Now the crit op is like the primary for the game, and each card outlines how you score the points and at what point you can perform the action in order to do so. Next is your chosen tac op. This also has the stipulations on it saying when you can score it, if there's actions you need to perform in order to do so, and any other information you might need for scoring. These 3 ops can all max out at 6 VP in a game. Lastly, the primary op, which you secretly selected at the beginning of the game, is revealed at the end, and whichever option you picked, you take the amount of VP that you got for it throughout the game, divide it by 2, and round up, meaning you can score an additional 3 VP from your primary op. And with that, you've got everything you need to start getting in your games of the new edition. Now keep in mind, this is just a brief overview of all the rules and things that you need to get started. Of course, there's going to be specific things that are going to happen throughout your games that are not going to be super clear in the rules. For stuff like that, we've linked some resources below that can hopefully help you out. Otherwise, if you have questions that we can help address in the comments, please let us know. If this video was helpful for you, please interact with it in any way that you can. Like, comment, all that stuff is great for us. Otherwise, we have a lot of new Kill Team content coming to you guys soon, and thank you for watching.